Good day. We're coming on the air with breaking news here in Florida, where we are already feeling the powerful effects of Hurricane Milton, a massive Category 3 storm closing in on the state's west coast. President Biden is making remarks on Hurricane Milton. We'll take those in just a moment, but first, a quick update. Right now, we think landfall is expected just hours from now here in the Tampa Bay area. But Milton's outer bands are already pounding the coast and will bring winds of at least 120 miles an hour. Flooding expected to be, frankly, catastrophic, with life-threatening storm surge up to 13 feet in some areas. Earlier today, Milton spawned a tornado outbreak that ripped across the southern section of the state called Alligator Alley. From Naples in the west across to Fort Lauderdale. The forecast for the hurricane is nothing short of terrifying. Millions have been ordered to evacuate. Let's go now to the president as he speaks.
Good evening. Within a few hours, Hurricane Milton is expected to make landfall on the west coast of Florida, the western coast of Florida. Already we're seeing impacts from the storm, including significant winds and heavy rain. And there's also been frequent and widespread tornado warnings throughout the day. And they're continuing and expected to expand as Milton moves over land, including a few that have already touched down in South Florida. Currently, Milton is a Category 3 with wind speeds up to 120 miles per hour. But no one should be confused. It's still expected to be one of the most and worst destructive hurricanes that hit Florida in over a century. You know, both the heads of the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service made it very clear in conversations I've had with them earlier today. Milton still carries incredible destructiveness, can wipe out communities, can cause loss of life. Storm surge is still expected to be up to 13 feet. So I urge everyone in Hurricane Milton's path to listen to local officials and follow all the safety instructions they give. At this point, evacuation is probably difficult. So I encourage people to look for safer shelter. Sometimes moving just a few miles can mean the difference between life and death. We've already approved emergency declarations for Florida. We have thousands of federal personnel on the ground. We've staged and are ready to go. We have 20 million meals, 40 million liters of water. At my direction, the Secretary of Defense, Austin, has pre-positioned search and rescue teams, helicopters, and high water speed vehicles as close to the storm as possible, so they're ready to conduct life-saving missions. And the administrator of FEMA will be on site tonight in Florida, and in the state's emergency operations center. Both Administrator Criswell and I will be in constant contact with state and local officials in the hours ahead. Once the storm hits, we're going to work with state officials to clear debris, restore power, and do it as fast as possible. The Army Corps of Engineers will pump out water and decrease flooding. We've already directed the Department of Defense to be ready to provide active duty service members to support Florida after the storm surge if Governor DeSantis requests the help, which I expect he might, just like we did in North Carolina. I have surged over 1,000 U.S. Coast Guard personnel to perform search and rescue missions and reopen the port of Tampa as soon as possible. Now, I want to reiterate a point I made clear earlier today to the folks who have been impacted by Helene. This impact, and will be now impacted by Milton. Over the last few weeks, there's been reckless and irresponsible and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies about what's going on. It's undermining confidence in the people in Florida, and incredible rescue and recovery work that has been undertaken. Literally, there are thousands of fellow Americans who are putting their lives at stake and putting on the line to do the dangerous work that needs to be done now. And it's harmful to those who most need the help. Quite frankly, these lies are un-American, and there's simply no place for them. Not now, not ever. Former President Trump has led this onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That is simply not true either. They're saying that money needed for these crises are being diverted to migrants. What the heck are they talking about? Stop it. It's outrageous. It's just not true. Now the claims are getting even more bizarre. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's so stupid. It's got to stop. Let me close with this. As difficult as these days and weeks have been, we've seen incredible courage by so many of our fellow Americans. I want to thank all the first responders for running toward danger instead of away from it, for saving lives and making a difference. FEMA personnel risking their lives, climbing on hillsides to reach people who cut off by Helena. Army National Guard flying through the gale wind force that it's amazing what they're doing. Firefighters lifting collapsed wood and metal in an attempt to see if there are survivors, any survivors under the debris, risking their lives. Coast Guard teams rappelling from helicopters to rescue people and risking their own lives. And there are countless friends and neighbors who have sacrificed for the greater good. Volunteers leaving their own families behind to help search for someone else's family. Fellow Americans looking out for one another. That's America at its very best. That's who we are. So my final message tonight is to the people of Florida and all the impacted states. We've got your back. We've got your back. And Kamala and I will be there for as long as it takes to rescue, recover, and rebuild. May God bless you all, and may God protect those serving in the eye of this storm on behalf of our nation. Thank you.
Why do you think Trump is spreading misinformation? Why do you think former President Trump has sent testing kits to President Putin during the height of the pandemic? Do you have a comment, sir? Why do you think Trump is?
Speaking about American.
Why do you think Trump is spreading misinformation?
I don't know. I simply don't know. You can speculate, but I just find it. I've used the phrase more than I've used it ever in my whole career. Un-American. It's un-American. It's not who the hell we are. What are they talking about?
Sir, have you considered calling him and asking him to stop doing that? To stop spreading this?
Oh, come on.
Mr. President, does Governor DeSantis need to take Vice President Harris's calls?
All I can tell you is I'm talking to Governor DeSantis. He's been very gracious. He's thanked me for all we've done. He knows what we're doing, and I think that's important.
Can you say that Florida has everything it needs for this storm?
President Biden taking a few questions after speaking to the press and the American people about the status of the response to what is unfolding before our eyes here, Hurricane Milton. These are some of the pictures you're seeing out of Tampa, where we are right now. The president also offering a full-throated rebuttal to some of the unsubstantiated rumors about the government's response and rescue and recovery operations. The president showing he is deeply exacerbated by some of what has been reported. In the meantime, he's also, of course, talking about what the government faces right now as this storm begins to build speed. Still a few hours off the Florida coast, but on a track that will take it really to the central heart of Florida. Let's go to Al Roker, who is watching the forecast. Al, can you march us through the evening?
Okay, Lester, here's the deal. And with each progressive model run of this, we've actually seen the path move a little further north, closer to Tampa, St. Pete. Now, currently, it is a Category 3 storm, as you mentioned. But again, as I like to, do not pay attention to the category. It's the impacts of this system that are going to make the difference. 120-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving northeast at 17 miles per hour. Tornado watches from Key West to Daytona Beach right now. And again, you can see this system really getting itself wrapped up. Makes landfall sometime this evening. We're thinking 8, 9 o'clock maybe to between then and midnight. But the forward motion of that keeps those winds actually pushing in storm surge at an even greater level. And then by early tomorrow morning, it's midpoint in the state, passing over Orlando, and then out to sea by Thursday afternoon. In the meantime, the storm surge, the expected peak is going to be from midnight to 5 a.m. from Sarasota down to Boca Grande, probably 9 to 13 feet, 8 to 12 feet going to the north, including Tampa, and another 3 to 5 feet as the storm exits and makes its way out into sea. The storm surge, what is it? It's that wall of water water. On top of a high tide that starts to move inland as those normal sea levels rise, the wind pushes that water. Water finds its way. The storm surge, of course, deadliest threat from the hurricane. The other impacts we worry about, the wind. We're talking about now wind gusts in Sarasota, 127 miles per hour. That is going to blow out windows and high rises, and in fact, power outages from Sarasota to right across the central part of the state could last for weeks, if not days. And then as far as the rainfall is concerned, we are talking about a high risk, Lester, from the eastern part of the state across Orlando to down to Sarasota. We could be looking at 18 inches of rain or more, but generally about 5 to 10 inches of rain. That is going to be catastrophic as far as infrastructure is concerned, roads washed out. And again, that storm surge, the thing that we are most concerned. Already Fort Myers seeing a few feet of storm surge already. Lester?
All right, Al, thanks for that update. Let's go to Tom Yanis in Sarasota. Al mentioned Sarasota. Tom, what are you seeing there?
Good evening, Lester. The conditions have dramatically gotten worse over the last hour here in Sarasota. We're feeling tropical storm force wind gusts right now. We're nowhere near the hurricane force wind just yet, but it's picking up. You can hear it maybe in the background. You can see the palm trees here starting to move a little bit. The major concern here, besides those hurricane force winds, of course, the storm surge that Al was talking about. We're going to be at a high level tonight as we broadcast throughout this storm. But here in Sarasota, they're waiting for that massive storm surge, that historic storm surge that will take out the first floor, possibly the second floor of buildings around here. There's a lot of boarded up doors. This entire area has been evacuated. In fact, to the barrier islands, which you can no longer get access to, they've cut off the water there to send a signal that if you stay on those barrier islands and the landfall is right over Sarasota, you will not survive this storm. So the situation here is critical. On top of all this, every hour or so, we get these warnings about tornadoes. So Floridians are on edge right now because regardless of where you live in the state, you are scared tonight because there are tornado warnings and there's this massive hurricane coming through. Luckily, it feels like people heeded those evacuation warnings. There was miles of traffic for days, which is actually a good sign. A lot of the gas stations did run out of fuel. It was hard to find fuel in these last final hours. Hotels were booked up. But again, those are all signs that people were trying to get out, which was the right thing to do. And right now it's a waiting game. We did have that breaking news, the earlier landfall, so it should hit around the Sarasota area, maybe just north of us a little earlier. We'll know over the next several hours what's going to happen here. For now, Lester, I'm going to send it back to you and go inside.
All right, Tom, you guys hunker down, and as we continue to watch this here in Tampa, you can see the trees behind me. Mainly the story right now here, besides the wind, is some heavy rain. They're expected to get a lot of it here. I say we are expected to get a lot of it here. Let's go to Sam Brock now. He is in Fort Myers, Florida. What's the picture there, Sam?
Lester, the picture right now is it's an excruciating wait for Southwest Florida. Lee County, where we are right now, 800,000 people. 416,000 of them are under mandatory evacuation, Lester. 13 different counties in the state of Florida have some level of mandatory evacuation. That equates to about a quarter of the entire state of Florida. Tom was just talking about storm surge. Al as well in Fort Myers. I want to point this out for you for a second. Caloosahatchee, the river right here. Look at these levels at the moment, okay? We are still hours away from tomorrow morning when there's going to be high tide, and the river level is basically at the street. You see the gazebo over my shoulder. That is street level right there. The water is sitting just below it. So this is a concern not just for here, Fort Myers, North Fort Myers on that side. We're inland. If you go out to the barrier islands, as Tom was just mentioning, we're talking about Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Pine Island. Okay, they were decimated by Hurricane Ian 2 years ago. The projections still hold right now for an 8 to 12-foot storm surge. Lester, you and I were both on the ground for Ian 2 years ago when we saw boats in the aftermath of this that had been lifted up above electric lines and were just sprawled out in the middle of streets. Block after block of homes crumpled into just wood and mangled metal and 8 to 10 feet high sand dunes. That is what's conjuring up right now in our mind's eye as we look at a scenario at least where the shelters are starting to fill. I'll leave you with this. Here in Lee County, they said that as of yesterday, among the 13 shelters, they had about 1,600 people. Tonight, it's almost 7,000 across the state of Florida. There are roughly 150 shelters, according to Governor DeSantis, with the capacity for 200,000 people, but they're at about 30,000 right now. You just hope, Lester, that enough people who are out there in mandatory evacuation zones like those barrier islands left when they still had time. Lester, back to you.
Yeah, Sam, and I appreciate you noting that Ian and the storm surge. Unless you have seen a storm surge or seen what it can do, it's hard to appreciate the idea of rapidly filling up a bathtub of water. That's the best I can tell you, but no chance to outrun it. And again, we saw in that hurricane boats lifted up and suspended in trees. Unbelievable. It's going to be a long night. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead all night long on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCNews.com, and a full wrap-up when I see you tonight on NBC Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt.